Let me just take a moment to just reiterate that this evening, 6:30 p.m., is the African Children's Choir. And if you've never seen them, I promise you're not going to want to miss tonight. I had the privilege of being a part of one of their concerts a few years back, and it's one of those things that sticks with you. Matter of fact, last night, my family and I, we were out on a walk, and I just started singing one of the songs from many years ago because it was that memorable of a night. And so if you're around, you got nothing going on this evening, or if you have something going on, clear your schedules, be here 6:30 to 8 p.m. We're going to be continuing in our series Hot Mess this morning. And if you've been with us over the last couple weeks, you know we've been talking about the life of David, or we've been talking about people who were significant in David's life and how that shaped him. And one of the things we've realized, we've unpacked this together, is that David is just a hot mess. That his life, it's not all neat and tidy, it's not put together. Matter of fact, it's a lot like many of our lives. This morning, we're going to continue looking at that, and we're going to specifically look at David's ascension to the throne, when David becomes king over Israel, and as a part of that, we're going to unpack this pursuit that he has for control. But before we get there, let's just take a second to be reminded of who David is and what he's done. David was born into a family, the youngest of many sons. Not a lot expected from the youngest kid, and so he was the shepherd. His job was to take care of the flock, to ensure that everything is going well. And then really, in an unexpected move, David gets selected to be the next king of Israel. Now, there's only one problem. The current king, Saul, is still alive. And so David's got to, what does this mean? What does this all look like? How am I the king if there's a king currently? Now, spoiler alert, Saul decides to take his own life in battle after what seems to be just certain defeat. And when Saul takes his own life, the whole kingdom is thrown into chaos. Like suddenly they have no king and they don't know what to do. And so what happens is half of the kingdom unite under Saul's son Ishbosheth. You won't be expected to remember that name. You can call him Ish. So half the kingdom unites under Ish, and the other half of the kingdom unites under David. Now here's the problem. Both groups of people believe that there should be one kingdom. The problem is they completely disagree who should be responsible and who should lead that kingdom. So it's just a recipe for disaster. And there are battles back and forth. Matter of fact, I want us to look at really the first recorded interaction, the recorded battle between Ishbosheth's men and David's men. It's found in 2 Samuel chapter 2, beginning in verse 12. Abner, son of Ner, together with the men of Ishbosheth, son of Saul, left Mahanaim and went to Gibeon. Joab, son of Zeruiah, and David's men went out and met them at the pool of Gibeon. So, just to make sure we're tracking, these two armies come together and they align on each side of this pool of Gibeon. One group sat down on one side and the other group sat down on the other side of the pool. Then Abner says to Joab, "Let's have some of the young men get up and fight hand to hand in front of us." "All right, let them do it," Joab says. Like this whole scene just cracks me up. Like it's silly. Basically, these great military leaders, Abner is the commander of Ishbosheth's army. Joab is the commander of David's army. These two great military commanders get together, and Abner has this brilliant idea. Why don't we get just 12 of your guys and 12 of my guys, and we'll line them up on this pool, and then we'll just let them go at it. We'll just watch them fight. This will be fun. It's like a gladiator battle for kicks. We'll sit back and we'll enjoy it. And Joab's like, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. Now the NIV here, which is the New International Version, which is the version of the Bible that I read this passage out of, it kind of cleans it up. And when doing it, it kind of strips away some of the disregard that Joab and Abner have for these soldiers. Most other translations say that Abner lined the men up, and then he looks at Joab and he says, "Hey, I got an idea. Why don't we let these young men go out and play?" Literally just play before us. To which Joab is like, "Totally, totes, that sounds like a great idea. Let's just go ahead and do that." And sure enough, they fight and all 24 men die. And this kicks off a battle, and this battle wages, it goes back and forth, but ultimately Joab, David's commander, and David's army are victorious. Now, they're victorious here in the first battle. But like any epic war, there are many, many battles before someone is determined to be victorious. And sure enough, that's what we see in this back and forth. There's a struggle, and Abner's army might take a little bit of the commanding lead, and then Joab's army fights back. But ultimately, in any battle, there is a tipping point. There's that moment where things shift, where the balance of power moves into one camp, and it becomes insurmountable. And that's exactly what we see here in this story. Abner, he goes to Ishbosheth, and he has an argument with him. There's a disagreement, and Abner is furious. He's furious. He doesn't think that the king is listening. He doesn't think the king cares about what his wants or his needs are. And so Abner declares these words in 2 Samuel chapter 3, beginning in verse 9. This is Abner speaking. He says, "May God deal with Abner, be it ever so severely, if I do not do for David what the Lord has promised him on oath, and transfer the kingdom from the house of Saul and establish David's throne over Israel and Judah." Basically, what Abner says is he looks at his king and he says, until my last breath, I will do whatever it takes to literally ensure that you never rule over a united kingdom. That I am switching my allegiance from you to David. Now, I have no idea how Abner made it out of the palace alive that day. I mean, just think about it. This is crazy. He just marches in, he looks at the king, and he says, I'm not backing you anymore. I'm backing David. Until I die, you will go down. And sure enough, Abner leaves. Nothing happens to Abner. And as you kind of unpack the text a little more, you realize that Abner's a bad dude. Like, you don't mess with him. He's not just the commander of the army, but he's got it all going on. Like, he's not the guy you want to mess with. And so, sure enough, what Abner decides to do is Abner says, look, I'm going to reach out to David. And I want a meeting with David because I need David to know that I am now on his side, that I want to see him victorious. Now, again, Abner's also smart. And he realizes that he can't just show up in a meeting with David with just words. So what he decides to do is he decides to gather up the elders of Israel. These are the spiritual leaders for the people of Israel. And he says, look, this is what God has made it clear to me, that I'm switching my allegiance from Ishbosheth to David, and I want to invite you to do the same thing. And all of the elders of Israel are like, okay, we're with you, Abner. Let's do it. And so Abner finally gets his audience with King David, and he says to David, he says, look, I'm coming, I'm placing my allegiance in you, and I've gotten all of these religious leaders, all of the elders, they're backing you as well. And David's like, this is awesome. Like, this is great. Like, it didn't really look like, I didn't know which way the battle was going to go, but again, all of the power in this moment is shifting to David. But Abner tells him, he's like, look, this is just the beginning. This is just the start. There's going to be a whole lot more that is to come. And then here, all craziness ensues. Like, it's crazy. Abner leaves the king's presence. Joab, again, the commander of David's army, sees Abner and is convinced that Abner has ulterior motives, and he's trying to infiltrate the palace. He's trying to ultimately undermine David. So Joab goes and kills Abner. And King David hears about this, and he's furious at Joab. He realizes they just killed the person that was going to really just move the battle into their hands. And so he chastises Joab. He curses Joab. Ishbosheth hears what's happened to Abner, and Ishbosheth's like, look, if they could kill Abner, then what would they do to me? And so he gets all freaked out, and he's worried about his life being taken, and he has a right to be worried, but he's worrying about the wrong people. He thinks that David's men are going to come in and kill him, when in actuality, it's actually his own men who kill him. 2 men come to the palace and they kill Ishbosheth. And these men, they go to David literally carrying Ishbosheth's head. And they come to David and they're like, look, David, we too place our allegiance in you. And this is evidence that we are on your side, that the king is now dead. And so the kingdom is yours. And you would think David would receive that like, well done. Well done. I don't know, that's what the king's supposed to do, right? Well done. But David gets upset. He's furious. He's furious that they would do this to Ishbosheth. So he takes some of his men who take these other 2 men out and he kills them. And like, it's chaos. It's crazy. Now here's the thing. I don't really get when people like say when they read the Bible, it's boring, because this is a Hollywood blockbuster. Like seriously, if we would just film this and put it out there, hundreds of millions of dollars, opening weekend, like this is insanity. And here in this moment, chapter 4 closes and it's chaos. And then with the opening words of chapter 5, there's a shift. This is what we read beginning in verse 1. All the tribes of Israel came to David at Hebron and said, we are your own flesh and blood. In the past, while Saul was king over us, you were the one who led Israel on their military campaigns. And the Lord said to you, you will shepherd my people Israel, and you will become their ruler. When all the elders of Israel had come to King David at Hebron, the king made a covenant with them at Hebron before the Lord, and they anointed David king over Israel. David is now king over all of Israel. And this has been a shift. I mean, again, as a young shepherd boy, you have really no control. And then you become this distinguished military leader, and suddenly you have a little bit more control, but you're not in control. And then you become king over part of the empire, and now it's like, okay, now I'm actually somebody. Now I actually have things I can control. But in this moment here, David controls everything. He's the man. It's his kingdom. He is in control. This week I started thinking about control. As I thought about it, as I pondered control, what I realized is control is an odd thing. It's fleeting. In the moment in life where you feel like you have control, where you've controlled something, is almost simultaneously the moment where you realize you're completely out of control. And so we seek control. We try to control our things. We try to control our lives. And when we get this part of our life under control, we realize, oh my gosh, there's so much more that I now have to control. I'm going to have just a confession moment here. I have a control problem. And when I say that, I don't have control problem in the sense where I just demand that everyone does what I say. It's a more subtle version of control. Matter of fact, I don't like to call it control. What I like to say is I like life to be predictable. And that has been something that has flared up in my life. It has flared up in my marriage. My wife and I, we've been married for 11 years, and my desire for predictability and my wife's fundamental character flaw of spontaneity is something that has not been compatible. And we've seen it sort of impact our relationship. And you would think, again, we've figured this out in 11 years, but it's still something that we wrestle with because I want all of life to be predictable. And my wife loves everything just to be fluid, it's spontaneous. And so here's what that looks like. It's very common on a Saturday morning for my wife to wake up and to look outside and for it to be a beautiful day and to say hey, let's go for a hike, or let's go on a bike ride, or let's go on a picnic to the park. And no matter what it is, in that moment, the answer is always no. I mean, it just is, because it seems small, but I feel out of control. It feels like just unpredictable, and it begins to freak me out. Now, the thing is, I don't get angry. I just shut down. So she's like, let's go to the park. I'm like, I don't want to go to the park. She's like, well, it's a beautiful day. I'm like, every day's beautiful. Well, that might not be true anymore. Southern California was true. I have the weather on my side now. So she'd be like, hey, look, it's a beautiful day, let's go. And I'm like, I don't want to go. And she's like, well, what? I don't want to go. I don't want to talk about it. And I would just shut down. I didn't want to deal with it anymore because it brought chaos and unpredictability into my life. Now, some of you hear me say this and you're like, it's official, Mike is crazy. And maybe you've come with a friend or a spouse and you're like elbowing them right now, like we need to find another church for next weekend because we can't be a part of it. And then there's others of you who are like, yes, thank you. Like I think exactly like you. Like you love predictability. You love everything to be neat and tidy. You want to make sure. I had someone after first service come up to me and say, I don't have a problem with spontaneity. I just like to make sure I plan for it. And I'm like, yes, yes. I feel you. Here's what I want you to understand. Maybe control for you doesn't look like it looks for me. But all of us desire control in our lives. It just might look a little different for each of us. Some of us, the way that we control our lives is through isolation. We think, I don't want to be hurt, I don't want to be exposed, and if I'm with people or if I'm in certain situations, then that increases the likelihood for that to happen, and so we isolate ourselves. Because if we isolate ourselves, we can control our environment. Some of us control with anger. We think it's just, if things start to get out of hand, then I can just amp up the anger, and usually that puts me in a power position, and I can be dominant, and I can bring back control into my lives. And that always works unless you're battling with someone else who controls their life with anger. Then it's just chaos. Some of us, we deal with control through anxiety. And that probably seems weird because most of us think of anxiety as these moments and these times in our life that are out of control, but yet in our anxiety, there's comfort and there's familiarity in some of these situations. And so in the midst of anxiety, we feel like we can be in control. Here's what I want you to understand. If left unchecked, no matter what it is, no matter how you bring control into your life, if left unchecked, it will ultimately become the thing that rules over you. That your desire for control will begin to control you. And that's exactly what happens for David. David doesn't stop when he unites the empire. Why? Because there's always more to control. There's always something else to pursue. So David, he assembles his army, this now united, powerful army. And he sets his sights on Jerusalem, which is currently being held by the Jebusites. And David thinks, I want Jerusalem for myself. And so he prepares his men and he takes them into battle against the Jebusite army. Now here's the thing. The Jebusites seem to have no understanding of who David is. Like they don't seem to be at all aware of what David did to Goliath or how powerful the Israeli army is. And that's a bit odd to us because in our world today, like something like that happens, David slays Goliath and someone's going to pick up their phone, they're going to tweet it, and everyone everywhere is going to know about how powerful David and his army is. But what we find here is the Jebusites, they're unaware. And you could even see it in the way that they approach this battle. This is what we read here in 2 Samuel chapter 5, beginning in verse 6. The king, being David, and his men marched to Jerusalem to attack the Jebusites who lived there. The Jebusites said to David, "You will not get in here. Even the blind and the lame can ward you off." They thought, David cannot get in here. So they look at David and they were like, we have nothing to be afraid of. Like, you are worthless. Like, this is not an army that we're worried about. You can't penetrate the walls of Jerusalem. We're awesome. You're not. We'll be victorious, David. You, literally a child could beat you, okay? This is not going to be a long fight. And then verse 7, I love verse 7. Nevertheless, David captured the fortress of Zion, which is the city of David. Like, that's just such good humor right there. Like, you will not beat us. And then David beat him. So that's exactly what happens. David and his army of Israel, they take the Jebusite camp. They take over Jerusalem. David conquers Jerusalem. And in it, his kingdom and his control, they grow.
and he sets up his residency in Jerusalem. And the text tells us that he married more women and he collected more concubines. And David's desire for control is now controlling him. It's all about more. It's about more power, more money, more women, more land, more possessions, more control. But then something happens. Something that hasn't happened in a long time. We're told that David seeks the Lord. David seeks the Lord. David hasn't sought the Lord since before he was king. He didn't seek the Lord when he decided to partner with Abner. He didn't seek the Lord when he accepted the crown. He didn't seek the Lord when he killed Ishbosheth's men. He didn't do it when he attacked the Jebusite army. He didn't seek the Lord when he seized Jerusalem. David didn't seek the Lord when he decided to name Jerusalem the city of David. So why all of a sudden does David choose to seek God? It's a great question. Let's unpack the story a little bit more. 2 Samuel chapter 5, beginning in verse 18. Now the Philistines had come and spread out in the valley of Rephaim. So David inquired, he seeks the Lord, shall I go and attack the Philistines? Will you deliver them into my hands? And we don't definitively know why in this moment David turns to God. What we do know is that this army, the Philistine army, has gotten stronger. It's gotten bigger. They've regrouped for some previous defeats, and now they're ready for battle. We also know that the Philistines were fine letting David be David. They were fine letting David be half of a king. But now that David has the entire empire to himself, they're thinking, we're not going to let David do to us what he did to the Jebusites. So they go on the offensive. And David knows that this is going to be a tough battle. There's going to be bloodshed. There's going to be back and forth. And so in this moment, David seeks the Lord. He seeks the Lord because he's afraid. He's afraid of losing his power. He's afraid of losing his title, his position, his authority. He's afraid of losing control. And so David does what so many of us do in seasons and times of uncertainty. We turn to God because we're afraid. Now, we know that David is afraid, not because of the first question he asks, but because of the second. The first question, he says, God, shall I go attack the Philistines? Simple question, simple answer. God either says yes or no. It's the second question that indicates to us that fear is a motivating factor for David. This is what he says, will you deliver them into my hands? God, I'm willing to do what you're asking me to do, but you got to promise me that when it's all said and done, I'm going to still be in control. So David seeks God. And in this moment, God says, yes, David, do this. And we read this in 2 Samuel chapter 5, verse 25. So David did as the Lord commanded him. Now here's why this scene is so important, this final scene. Because it is the moment that David finally relinquishes control. It's this moment that he gives it all over to God. And I think that's something that we need to learn. That's something that we need to be exposed to, because the truth is, if we're going to overcome our desire for control in this life, then we have to be willing to do the same thing that David did, to give over control of our lives to God before we're controlled by it. This week I went to the Oracle of Knowledge, known as Google, and I searched what are ways that we give up control in our lives? Like how do we seek to move past desires to control things? And I found all sorts of things, like here's 6 ways to blah, 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 or 7 solutions to ... And as I read through them, what I realized is none of them were inherently bad. Like they were good tools. They were techniques. But I also realized that it wasn't the solution. That if we want to move past our desire for control, it's not in 7 things we do or 6 habits we start. It's coming with the realization that control is something that we need to give over to God. That if we want to stop being controlled by the things that we are attempting to control in our lives, that we have to trust God with those things, that we have to be willing to let it go. And so literally in the words of Elsa, just let it go. Let it go. Can't hold me back anymore. Let it go. Come on now. Come on, sing with me. Let it go. Turn around and close that door. I'll be on the worship team next week. Said no one ever. Here's the thing. I wanted to sing it with my awful voice and all because the truth is, you will never forget this. And that's my hope. My hope is that you don't forget that truth. That if you are going to relinquish control of your life and let go of the things that are controlling you and give it to God, you have to be willing to let it go. Because here's what I want you to understand. Control was never ours to begin with. See, the problem with life is it perpetuates this feeling of control. And everywhere we look, it perpetuates this belief of control. As we set up our house, I have one of those Amazon Echo Alexa devices, and I wanted all of my house to be connected so I could be like, Alexa, turn on the TV. Alexa, turn up the thermostat. Alexa, put on mood music, just for random times. What I realized is that Alexa, she's no good. She's not. It's like a child. They don't ever do what you ask them to do. But I wanted this. I wanted it because it created a perception that I was in control. And so many of us, we seek those same things. So we try to control every aspect of our lives. And when we do that, what we're ultimately trying to do is we're trying to do God's job for him. Maybe you haven't thought of it this way, but literally in those moments, you're trying to be God. So let me suggest something different. Let me suggest that this week you really do let go. That you stop trying to pretend or to mask this image of control. You realize that if you're ever going to experience abundant life, it begins with giving it over to God. I feel like this so much, and I say this a lot, but we overcomplicate this whole relationship with Jesus thing. There's a reason why Jesus says in Scripture it's faith like children that he draws near to. It's because children just have fun. Children have unbridled joy. But children also realize it's not that difficult. So this is one of those things. If you want to move beyond being controlled by your pursuit of control, then you just need to trust it to God. We need to follow after David's leading. But my prayer is we wouldn't wait till the moment that we're overcome. We wouldn't wait till the moment that our life is in shambles. We wouldn't wait till the moment like David did till we're racked with fear, but that we would just trust God before that moment with our lives. So practically, if that's something that you wrestle with, in some ways I know it's something we all wrestle with, here's my challenge to you, is that you would wake up every day this week and pray a simple prayer like this. God, give me the strength to trust that you are in control. And then as you go about your day and you find these moments, these instances where you begin to slip back into doing God's job for him, that you would stop. And you would pray that prayer again. God, give me the strength in this moment, in this season, to trust that you are in control. And I promise as you do that every day, and every moment you feel that rising in you, it will begin to shift your expectations. It will shift your perception. And it will shift the balance of control from you to God. Because the thing is, God, he's in control. God is the one who brought order to chaos. God is the one who spoke this world into existence, that God is there with us at all times. And I realize on a morning like this that maybe some of you have never said yes to Jesus. You've never placed your life in his hands. Maybe you've never placed your life in anyone's hands because the thought of that is just terrifying. Or maybe at one point in your life, you placed your life in someone's hands. And they didn't treat you like you deserved to be treated. And you were hurt. And you declared on that day, never again will I trust my heart, my life, to anyone. If that's where you're at, let me just say I'm sorry. I'm sorry that you were treated that way. I'm sorry that you were made to feel disposable. But I want you to know that's not God. That God is worthy of your heart. That he's worthy of your life. And that he will treat you the way you were meant to be treated. Because what God wants from us is not blind allegiance, but he wants us to experience life, full life. Jesus would say it this way, I want you to experience life abundantly. And who of us wouldn't want that? So if you're here today, maybe God has put this on your heart, and maybe you're realizing that, yeah, you've tried to control for too long your own life. My challenge is that you would be willing to trust that to Jesus. After the service, we have a team of people that will be over in the connection zone who would love to talk to you about what that looks like. Give you tools to take that next step, to prepare to reorient your life around the one who's deserving of it. Would you pray with me? God, I'm so grateful for the life of David and from all that we learn from him. What I love is that throughout the scriptures, you don't fill the pages with perfect people, but you fill it with mess-ups, with people who make some of the same mistakes over and over again that we do. But God, I pray that we would learn from him, that we would learn from David and not wait for calamity to strike or for our lives to fall apart before we relinquish control to you, God. But I pray that we would make that declaration today and every day forward, that you are in control. God, give us the strength and the courage to trust that. God, I pray for people here who are wrestling with maybe this concept for the first time. What does it mean to give our lives to Jesus? God, I pray that they would know that that commitment is one filled with love, with acceptance, that in Jesus is one who is worthy of our lives, of our hearts, of our minds, of our souls. God, no matter where we come from today, I pray that all of us would make a commitment, like David did, to relinquish our desire for control to you. And it's in Jesus' name that we pray. Amen.
Guys, I want to say thank you so much for joining us this week, and come back next week as we look at another great story in the life of David. Have a wonderful week. God bless.